Good afternoon, students. I bet some of you are thinking, I haven't been called students in a while. I'm John Buckman, and glad that you all joined us for what is the desired outcome of in-service training, a pretty uh, valuable topic in the volunteer fire service. And so we have Brian McQueen with me, and we're going to get started here, but got a couple little house things to do at the very beginning. Obviously, you know that we're doing this over the internet. We're using voice over IP technology, using your computer with speakers or headsets. Please make sure your speakers and headsets are turned on and the volume is turned up. You can't hear us without. Your microphones have all been muted, and but we do want questions. We do want you to send questions or send a request to the chat room so that we can address those questions at the end of the presentation. We know that's not always the best of things, but it's the best way we can do this here. If you have technical difficulties, there's an email for you to email and see if they can help you, or go to the chat function as well. So we do have several handouts uh, in the box for this webinar. So we hope that you will go to that. Our slide presentation is provided in the box as well, so you have access to our material. And if you have any questions, Brian and I's email address is on the last slide, and we do encourage you to talk to us. Uh, this is a passion for Brian and I about training. We've both been doing this a long time, and we know the value of training. So with that, we'll go to the next one. What is the VCOS doing? Well, we've been very busy over the last year, I think, and we're trying to do some more things. One of the big things that we're doing is we're doing this right here. We're doing more webinars. We're Symposium in the Sun in 2023. If you haven't attended a Symposium in the Sun, we encourage you to do that. It's held in November in Clearwater Beach. Not a bad place to go in November. But we've been doing this for 25 years, and we've been sold out for 8 years. So I encourage you, if you're going to do it, you better sign up quickly, because the hotel will sell out, and then you'll be staying at a hotel maybe a mile or two away. So we're looking at revising ribbon reports. One of the outcomes of this presentation is that Brian and I helped the NVFC and VCOS and the International Society of Fire Service Instructors rewrite the training, I'll say, report, white paper that NVFC had produced several years ago. But we're looking at developing a critical thinking boot camp for chief officers to be delivered in 2024. Brian.
Sure. Let's talk a little bit about what the NVFC is doing. The NVFC is doing some remarkable things in regards to its training and its health and wellness programs. We've gained in our membership dramatically over the last 10 years, and we're pretty pleased about the support that we received from the Volunteer Fire Service and our collegial work with the Volunteer Combination Officers section. We're launching Fire Service Discrimination and Harassment Toolkit, which is a great toolkit that's going to be introduced at the FDIC this year. Our training summit, June 23rd and 24th, is going to be in Oklahoma City. There are still travel stipends available. If you haven't done it, I encourage you to go to nvfc.org and look underneath our training summit link for you to get your travel stipends for that. If you've never been to an NVFC training summit, you will you don't know what you're missing, to be honest with you. John was there last year with me when we presented, and the feedback and the number of people that were there was remarkable. And again, we also have our emergency drinking water program for wildland firefighters through Anheuser-Busch, and we were able to distribute thousands of cans of water for those people, especially in the wildland training area. Our training, we launched a new recruit track and virtual classroom. If you have new recruits into your fire department, I would encourage you to steer them to this virtual track. It's a great classroom that kind of gives them an introduction to what the Volunteer Fire Service is about. Free training with the Training Hazmat through the PHMSA grant. Take a look at it on our website. We are looking at locations across the United States to provide that training. And again, the multiple opportunities we have, check your QR code here, and you'll see that the remarkable progress that we've made in the training and health and wellness aspect of fire service.
Some upcoming events for the VCOS. Again, here listed on your screen here. I'm not going to read them all to you, but we encourage you to look at some of our educational offerings from the webinars. If you can't attend them live, you can always attend them on the recorded version. There are also, Fire Rescue International, which is our big conference, the HAZMAT conference, as well as Community Risk Reduction Leadership Conference, which Community Risk Reduction is a new, I'll say concept. I say new because it's probably only about 10 years old. In the fire service, that's pretty new. But if you're not looking at community risk assessment in your departments, I encourage you to look at that program and see how that can help you sell your department program. So this program is aimed at in-service training. What do you do after you become certified, after you complete the recruit training program? What do you do in order to remain professional? And I don't mean whether you're paid or volunteer, I mean professional. Professional is about delivering the service. And so we're going to talk about that today. We do want to, one of the bigger proponents of training in the fire service for many years is our sadly departed friend, Bobby Halton. So Brian and I want to dedicate today's presentation to Bobby Halton, the editor-in-chief of Fire Engineering Magazine, the executive director of FDIC. He's been missed. As I told Diane when we talked about him a couple weeks ago, Bobby's one of the kind of guys that you could be on the phone and he can make you mad as hell, and 15 seconds later, he'll have you laughing. He had a passion for training, and so we want to recognize him by dedicating this presentation to Chief Bobby Halton. God bless you. So we do have a very unique partnership. There is no competition between the NVFC and the VCOS. We are here for the betterment of the volunteer and combination departments. The NVFC has a lot of members. They probably have a lot of members from smaller departments. We have members from more medium or larger combination and volunteer systems. So we both are in this together. We are working hard to make sure that the volunteer fire service is successful and continues to grow.
I think that's a very important part, John, that you made there, because if it wasn't for past chief and Jim Seavey Sr. bringing us together in that Clearwater Symposium, the Sun meeting, I think it was back in 2015 he had this inspiration, and if he could just look down upon us and see the growth that we've made in a partnership, a true partnership, and it's for the fire service in general. It doesn't matter whether it's volunteer or career. We're looking at the entire fire service together, and we've just made some remarkable progress. And kudos to your leadership and the leadership of VCOS and our NVFC to be able to do that. So we look about training and how expensive it is. Let's face it. Think of the cost of not training. Think of the cost, what would be incurred on a fire department for not training, the injuries, the failing to complete the job that you responded to. How about the legal implications for putting someone on the fire ground untrained in the position that they're supposed to be trained to do? In New York State, PESH would be knocking at our door without a problem there. Your image in the community, not being able to show up to a call or showing up with unqualified people, on a rig or on an EMS call, the picture that you're drawing to your family or to the people in your community, what do we want to do? So training is so important, and there's so many ways that you're going to hear today how we can include training in departments no matter what the size. 11 years ago, directors of the National Volunteer Fire Council, through their training and education branch, decided that they needed to put together a white paper that was going to address training in the volunteer fire service. This was 10 or 11 years ago now. It was an outstanding document at that time. But take a look at it now. Just take some time to reflect upon yourself how much the fire service has changed. Our tactics have changed. Our equipment has changed. Our technology have changed. The research is being done by UL, and our leadership. And, the recruiting of volunteer firefighters, for us. And even in the career forces, they're not knocking the doors down like they did. Instead of having 250 applications, maybe they're getting 110. So again, everything has changed there. And John and I were sitting having breakfast at the National Volunteer Fire Training Summit last year in Orlando, and John was reading over the white paper, and he says, "Oh my God, Brian," he says, "we've got to update this." So what we did is we put together a group of volunteer and career firefighters, like we did for the Lavender River Report, and we put together this document, which is free of charge, training volunteer firefighters to be combat ready. The links are on the MVFC and the VCOS websites. I would encourage every officer to download this link, to use it, to read it, and to embed it in your training activities. I think it's so important that until we've got to train until we get it right. And it's not always going to be that way. Let's think of the NCAA playoffs that were on last night, and even the women's that were on Sunday. What made them successful? If the plays weren't working, they kept running the plays. We do the same thing in the fire service. We train until we get it right. We'll go through just our introduction is very brief. It's on the slide. Many of you know John and I. So I'm a retired school administrator, past fire chief for the Whitesboro Volunteer Fire Department. I'm a 45-year member of that department, and I'm very proud to serve that department now as their health and safety officer. I'm a retired director for the Firefighters Association of the State of New York, and I sit as a director of the National Volunteer Fire Council representing New York, and I sit on their Health, Safety, and Training Committee and chair their Cancer Committee. You're up, John. You're muted.
Nan said feedback. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that. Technology sometimes fail. Well, I've been in the fire service for 53 years. In May of this year, I've been a fire chief for 35 years in a volunteer department that transitioned to a combination. I'm currently the board president of the German Township Fire Department, but my best and most important title is grandfather. I've been very lucky to get to meet people like Brian, and that has helped me in my endeavors, that helped me, give me guidance, that were mentors for me and continue to be mentors for me. So I'm glad to be here today. When you look at in-service training, you decide what is most important for your firefighters to know. One of the things that we said in the report that Brian talked about is that every department has to decide what is important for their firefighters to be able to perform. Understand there are OSHA rules out there that describe what training you're supposed to have. And one of the most valued statements in that OSHA document is that you, as the employer, shall train your members to the job you expect them to perform. If you expect them to do water rescue, then you better provide training for that. If you expect them to climb ladders, then you better provide training for that. Not only training, but drills to make sure that they can still do the job. Brian and I have had many discussions about what does good look like. And good looks like what you decide in your department is good. And that is a challenge for many chiefs as well as training officers. How do we know that our firefighters are going to be good? Brian.
What skills do we want our firefighters to perform? We believe as leaders in the fire service that we have to put the best of the best on the floor, on the rig, and at the incident. That's our job as leaders. That's what we've been governed to do. That's what we've been trained to do. We develop your team concept within your station so that everyone on your team understands what your plan is and how we're going to respond to incidents and how those incidents are going to be part of our training aspect. All right. Accomplishing such an event as a fire, a motor vehicle crash, hazardous material incident, a water rescue, wires down call, all of those things. We need to make sure that we provide our firefighters, those people that we walk into battle with, the best. Take a tour of your community. Get members aware of the potential issues we face if we respond to that location. Just last week, our county executive, through our emergency management office in Oneida County, New York, put together a tabletop training for 2 county regions where railways split through the communities right down the middle. This was brought about by the East Palestine derailment. We need to gather input from your team. We need to maybe, how about creating a survey, and provide feedback to them. Take a look at your community. It changes every hour of the day. It changes. The number of people that travel down your main roads may not be the same in the evening as it is during the day. The worst thing that we can do is show up at an incident and have no knowledge of the building or its contents. Taking it further, what passes through the community? What are on those rigs? What are on those budget rent cars? What are on those rail cars that travel through us? And what are the hours of operation that we have within our buildings? Are the people in there 24 hours a day? Are there split shifts? Are there 3 shifts in working in buildings? We need to know that stuff. How about your water supply? For those of you that have hydrants, what are your hydrants rated? And if not, are we sure that if we're responding to a call, we have enough water, tankers or tenders, whatever you want to call them, coming to a call?
What skills? Again, we're going back to skills. There's the 3 questions there is must have, need to know, and need to perform. When you look at need to perform, that is so important. Brian's mentioned that a couple times in his presentation. It's 100% right 100% of the time. When you look at, a couple people that you think about that are good at what they do, and I'm not even going to talk about the fire service, but imagine if Sully Sullinger, who was piloting the plane that crashed in the Hudson in New York, if he would not been a great or even good pilot, what if he'd been a mediocre pilot? How many people do you think would have died? And so when you look at your firefighters, and the list that Brian just went over, and you'll have a much more detailed list, it's what must they have to know? There's lots of nice to know stuff out there, but what do they need to know? And then can they perform it 100% right 100% of the time? When you look at skills training, one of the things that I learned years ago I didn't learn it by experience. I had a fire chief or assistant fire chief tell me this. First time I ever had to operate the pump on a working structure fire. You know what? He's on the line is deployed, they're getting ready to go in the house. They're asking me to charge the line, and I go, there's no water. He walks over to the truck, pulls the tank to pump valve. I failed the first step of operating a pump because I had not done repetitive training, repetitive drills. When you look at the second part is, my guys would laugh at me when I'd say, okay, I want you to don your SCBA blindfolded or with your eyes closed, because I want you to be able to not have to think all the steps you have to put an SCBA on. I want you to be able to perform it flawlessly and without having to think about it. And when you open up your eyes, sometimes your eyes can confuse you. So look at how, when you look at your training program, you develop the skills list of what they must have, what they need to know and need to perform. Make sure that you do repetitive training, so when the chips are down, when the world is about to crash on them, they are not going to make a small mistake that may cost them their life or cost another firefighter their life. Knowledge. Not only do you have to have skills, you have to be smart enough to use your hands. You also have to be able to use your brain. And in today's world, the fire dynamics are changing all the time. The stuff that Research Institute out of UL is doing is amazing. It's not just Brian and John going in a garage, just coming up with some theory and writing a book. We need to follow the science. So your firefighters have to have some knowledge. So not only are you going to do skills, you're going to do knowledge training. And this is just a simple example of some of the knowledge things that Brian and I come up with that we think you need to be training your firefighters on. You will have more on your list, because if we listed the entire list, there might be 35 or 40 things. But You have to decide what's important for your firefighters. And here's again some more things. Brian mentioned water supply in the rural water system. So critical. How many times do we run tankers? And then when we run tankers and we're running out of water, that's a failure. That's a failure. Doing rural water supply takes its own command system, its own resources in order to provide water to the instant commander. Uh, in my area, the a large urban fire department requested a tanker task force, and we responded with 14 tankers to help this fire department put out this fire. And we did not run out of water one time. And you might say, wow, where do I get 14 tankers? Well, you might be surprised. We got 2 from each adjoining county. One county sent us 3. 14 tankers provided the water. And I will tell you, they did a great job getting it all organized, not running out of water, didn't have any accidents, no mistakes. So, but again, you have to practice those kind of things.
I think John
Brian?
you brought up some good some good points there because you respond to a large industrial building and you're in a non-water hydrant district, and you're running ladder companies and towers. You're going to have to make sure that you do have those tanker shuttles coming, and you've got to make sure you do have enough water because you've got to protect your firefighters. You've got to protect possibly some exposures and whatever. So developing your training program is based upon identified skills and knowledge. It's like building your new home. If you don't build a good foundation, your home's going to crumble. I think it's the same thing we can talk about when we're building a training program. If we don't, as leaders, as officers in our fire department, build a good training program, we're going to crumble. We really are. And it's got to be a team approach there. Building trust in your officers, meet with them, whether it's on an individual basis first and on a group basis. Discuss your plan for competent training programs to meet all the functions of your department. Whether it's exterior firefighting, interior firefighting, apparatus drivers, EMS response, traffic incident management. Sometimes we forget about those people that are protecting us. I think that's a crucial piece of any training program. Survey your officers and firefighters and obtain maybe some input on what they see as the major impacts on our community. Use them. They may see things that you don't see as well, and then develop your programs to meet those needs. In New York State, our Office of Fire Prevention and Control gathered career and volunteer firefighter leadership together back in 2014 and developed and distributed its recommended best practices for fire department training programs. That's also free, and it's a free download on the New York State Office of Fire Prevention and Control website. It's a great document. It starts some great discussions for you. What do people need in the positions that they serve need for training? How are they going to be qualified people to fill those positions? Get into your community, review your structures and hazards. How about reviewing your historical incident trends to some of those structures? What were some incidents that you responded to? And if you have them on file, how about your post-incident reports to those places? Why not go back and pull them out? Documentation, data is so important, and you can use them in your meetings. Always keep in mind, as great sports teams do, when they begin their seasons, they start with the basics. They start with the basics, and sometimes it's not a bad thing to go back to the basics. We have a chief right now that believes in basic training, and I agree with him 100%. You've got to refresh yourself on those basics. I think I heard it just this past weekend with the NCAA playoffs, men's and women. We begin in the summer and plan our future. Well, at least they begin. They began somewhere. So why not develop a year-long calendar? Look at your monthly topics. Refresh yourself as the calendar goes on. What did we miss? What are we missing? And what do we need to do? I think that's crucial. Because people know what's going to be coming, and they know what the qualifications are going to be for them to be a firefighter. Training.
Brian, let me
Sure.
interject something here.
Sure.
You mentioned foundation, and I learned years ago when I was the state fire academy director here in Indiana that it's all about the foundation. If you don't understand how to do the basic skills, how are you going to do the advanced skills? And one time I was talking with Dennis Compton, former fire chief in Mesa, Arizona, and we're talking about an advanced search and rescue class that was being advertised over the weekend. And he goes, "What is an advanced search and rescue class? How do you do search and rescue advanced?" And it's like, I said, "Well, Dennis, it's all about marketing." I said, "Firefighters are not going to come to a basic search and rescue class." That's true. But it is about the basics. The other thing, Brian, you mentioned on this, and we haven't talked about this, but look at past incidents. Look at your after action reports. And we hope you do after action reports so that you can go back to your training division and go, look, our people can't catch a hydrant. They can't get the ladder off the truck, whatever it might be. But that is a critical component of developing your training program. Look at the mistakes. And it may not be that everybody makes the mistakes, but it may be one or two people that you need to individually coach. So I just add that to Brian's comments. Thanks, Brian.
Sure. Outstanding comments, John. We get into the training, program, components as well. Identify the right person within your fire station that's going to coordinate your training needs. I think it's got to be very important. Everything's not going to fall on the chief's shoulders. Everything ends there, but again, he or she have got to have trust in who that person's going to be. Does this person have the qualifications to do the job with competencies? Do they have those fire instructor 1 and 2? Do they have those fire officers positions? Or is he just, or are they just one of the good old people that, oh yeah, they're going to do a great job. It's off my desk. Let them do it. We see it a lot, and, we've really got to take a look at where we want to go and do we want that to happen to us? Some qualities, of this person that's going to be your leader in your training should focus around them have passion, passion for excellence. I think that's very, very important. A willing to serve. It's not just, you got to put that extra time into it. You got to be a team player, humble. I think it's important for that person that leads your training division to be humble and organized. You have to be organized. You just don't set up a training calendar once a month and go, oh, what are we going to do this month? That's got to be set up. And you've got to have a heart. That training officer, that person that leads you has got to have a heart. They've got to be caring. Everything doesn't go right the first time. But if we're mentoring them, if we're teaching them, if we're instructing them, and have that energy to do that, I think that's so important. It's like coach the coaches or train the trainers. It's got to be a good communicator. Nick Saban, head football coach at Alabama, says mediocre people don't like high achievers, and high achievers don't like mediocre people. So develop a back to basics skills course or a refresher. Put that mentoring program in place for your new firefighters and make that part of your training program. And trust the person that's doing your mentoring program to do a great job. We have a great mentor in my department right now. He's doing a fantastic job, and I see the difference in our new firefighters. Hey, how important is it to don your PPE in a manner that will meet the incidents that you respond to? About a little competition, have some fun, build some fun and some activity into it. You won't win the game if you don't put on your helmet or buckle your chin strap. Trust me. Become familiar with your new strategies and tactics. Educate yourself. Get out yourself and learn from those people that teach you other things. If 82% of your incidents you respond to are EMS calls, then you better have a trained staff that's going to meet that EMS needs in your department. And like I said, add some enjoyment. Add some enjoyment to your training. I think if we do that, I think it's going to provide some excitement, for your firefighters. Your instructor components. What's important about being an instructor. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about this as an educator as well. Be on time. You see a couple of them that are up there right now. You've got to have the desire, but you want to be on time. Don't show up 5 or 10 minutes to a training that's supposed to start at 6:30, and you show up at 6:40. And your equipment's not out, or your PowerPoint that you're doing is there. You've got to be prepared. Maximize and be efficient with their time. Don't waste their time or they won't be coming back. Make training engaging. Make it engaging. You can blend a little PowerPoint into it or classroom into it, but don't make that your entire program. Engage them, make them active, and use a lesson plan. Make sure that lesson plan that you're using by your instructors is the same one that every instructor uses. And that's going to reassure that Mary or Susan or Jim or John are going to be taught the exact same thing. So when they get off the back of your engine and they got the hook or the hydrant, they're going to know exactly what they're going to do. Fragmentation will impede progress. If you fragment things, you're going to impede the progress of your fire department. Develop your lessons that will involve the various learning styles. There's so many learning styles out there right now. There's visual, there's auditory, there's written, there's kinesthetic, and there's multimodal. Kinesthetic learners have to do something to get it, while multimodal learners shift between different techniques. So we have to understand the people that we're teaching. Develop a blend of classroom and hands-on learning to check for understanding. Some people are much better learners doing it with their hands than they are sitting in a classroom. We have to understand, we have to read them. Regardless of the class, firefighters you are teaching, there will always be a diverse set of learning abilities that demand your attention. And that's maybe sometimes where you pull your other officers in or your other firefighters in that can assist you with that. Some firefighters are faced with daunting task of communicating their needs to instructors. A need to develop an effective communication piece is crucial in a successful instructional plan, which then adds to a successful training program. Being encouraging and motivating under challenging times. I mean, think of what we just went through. COVID was challenging times, but how did many of us adapt to it? We went to Zoom meetings or we went to Microsoft Team meetings. So we didn't let training go by its wayside. We adapted. And sometimes that's what we have to do. You must be a good listener and understand, your impactors. And disrespectful students, we're all going to have them. That can kill your love of teaching. But you also have to be careful of the way that you about dealing with your disruptions. Don't let it slide, because if it happens to one, then the other person's going to think they're going to be able to get through it as well. Address it immediately. Why are you there? Set your ground rules before you even start. And time management, so crucial in any lesson that you do. Know what you need to get through and develop that plan to stay within your time frame of instruction. I think they're all crucial and they're all very important to make a successful training program.
Brian, before we go ahead, great information that you just provided on the last two slides, and I would hope that everybody had a chance to maybe make a few notes. But you said some things that are really, I think we need to reinforce. One of the things you mentioned was passion for excellence. If the training officer does not have a passion for excellence, guess what you're going to have in firefighters' performance? It's called mediocrity. So if you have assigned or selected a training officer who is not passionate, fire them. Get rid of them. Get someone else to do the job. And so that, I think that's, again, a big deal. When you your skill sheets, Brian talked about consistency, using lesson plans, using skill sheets, so that everybody is taught and evaluated to the same standard. I know writing objectives is hard, and we don't like to do that. But our firefighters want to be successful, so tell them what you expect them to be able to do. Don an SCBA in 90 seconds, whatever it might be. But tell your people what you expect them to do. The other thing is about performance, about feedback, is that last one there is feedback to the students. I got to tell you, in today's world, it may not be something that the older people say they need. Everybody needs feedback. Remember, you're going to give positive feedback 90% of the time. 90% of the time, the firefighters are going to perform the skill or have the knowledge that you expect them to have. Give them feedback. Thank you. Pat on the back. Give them, I used to give out Tootsie Roll Pops. I'd have a bunch of Tootsie Roll Pops in my fire coat pocket. So when somebody did something good, I'd give them a Tootsie Roll Tootsie Roll Pop. Don't hand out dumb suckers. That's not a good idea. You guys all know what I'm talking about. You've seen those kind of suckers. But they want feedback. The students want feedback. That also motivates them to come to the next training session. So just reinforcing some of the things that Brian said. Thanks, Brian.
How many times do you hear, how did I do? How did I do?
All right. Essential jobs, tasks, and descriptions. These are 13 essential job tasks that come out of NFPA standard. Oh, I know, like many of us, NFPA is a four-letter word, not something we're always real proud of. But NFPA gives us good guidance on some information. So we give you some of the 13 essential job tasks that NFPA says you as a fire chief should look at and think about doing. And the first one is that while wearing your PPE, including your SCBA, you will do physical activity that includes working in extremely hot or cold environments for prolonged periods of time. Wow, that's sort of like a physical assessment. When we look at what do we expect our firefighters to be able to do, I don't care, we're talking about volunteers or career people, they have to be physically able to do the skills. You need to test them. If they can't climb a ladder, physically can't climb a ladder, then we got to look at that. The Career Fire Service has the work performance evaluation process. I believe that's something that you should look at in the volunteer fire, and we should look at in the volunteer fire service. It says here's the minimum things you have to be able to do. Not only do you have to be able to do the skill, you have to be able to do the skill combined with other skills and physically be able to perform them. We don't want volunteer firefighters who just show up with a t-shirt. We want them to show up able to do the job. I realize they may not be able to do all of the job. There are limits to all of us. But you need to know what those limits are before there's a fire. So look at, this is an essential job task. It comes from the NFPA standard, but it's talking about making sure that they can do physical activity and not pass out. I mean, years ago, we had a firefighter that almost every time we had a working structure fire, and that was back in the days when we were having a working structure fire almost every week, or maybe even 2 a week, he'd pass out. What we found out is because he only eats 1 meal a day. Well, you can't be a firefighter and only eat 1 meal a day, especially if you're having this physical activity before you eat. And so through some medical education, he got to where he would eat 3 meals a day like all of us. They weren't big meals, but at least he was putting some nutrition in his body. Brian?
Different activities that we wanted to do. So we get in the hot atmosphere, the hot weather outside. Why not do a decontamination job? Decontamination skill outside. When it's hot weather and you're using water and things along that line. But these are all job performances that we need to do. The JPRs are very, very important in the fire service today. And again, in the volunteer fire service, we all have different jobs. Some of us may not be interior firefighters, some may be exterior, some may be EMTs or whatever it is. So whatever that job performance is that we need them to do, I think that's what we need to plan them to do. Here's another one. Depending on your local jurisdiction, John said it. Climate. We have an 8-story masonry. Used to be a senior citizen housing unit in our fire district right now, which now is called. It's a Section 8 housing, and we're responding there. I think last year we had 111 calls at that location. For just smells and bells calls, or people need to get into their building. So what do we need to do? We need to make sure that we address those concerns with those people that are living in those facilities and try to cut down on our call volume. Because it's going to be the point where there's going to be a fire there, and we're not, and people just don't want to show up because they think it's a smells and bells call. So, while wearing your personal protection, ensembles in your SCBA, do we have maze trainers within our district? We do. We had a maze trainer built in the town of Whitestown that we use religiously, in training them. We put a collapsible floor in there as well. We take some of our new fire centers to give them the confidence of working with an SCBA, and we, black out their mask and things like that. But again, it's a training aspect. We do it together as a training aspect, and we do it as a team approach. And again, if they don't want to do it and they don't feel confident, we don't have them do it. We just get into that one. Some other jobs, operating fire apparatus. What do we do to teach our firefighters the correct ways of driving their apparatus? Do we do EVOC classes? Do we do yearly training in the EVOC classes? Do we recertify our drivers? If they pull out of the fire station and they're not trained in running that apparatus out into the busy highway, and all of a sudden we run into an accident, whose fault is it? Why aren't we doing those things? I think it's just important. We've got to take a look at how we train, who we train, and what we're training for. I think I think the important thing when we talk about the overall training and the overall goal that we want to get is we want to make sure that we are putting the best people on that apparatus to do the best job that we can do, in protecting our stakeholders and our residents that we have in there. Functioning as a team approach, togetherness, knowing who's got the hook, who's got the can, who's got the hydrant, what the officer's doing. That's all got to be built into not only training, but in the communication aspect of your officers and your apparatus driver. Your overall training goal: perform assignments in a safe manner, minimizing exposures to carcinogens and traumatic brain injury. Hey, how about to ensure that we provide the highest level of service to our community? We must provide training that consistently, and that's a key word there, consistently maintains.
Brian, can you hear me, Brian?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry. I can't hear you, so whenever it's time for me to speak, maybe you'll give me a point.
Okay.
Ready to connect.
It's not you. It's me. So
okay. All right. We want to make sure that we're consistent, and it maintains and enhances the knowledge and skills and abilities of our members. We must design training that's going to increase our members. Do some community awareness programs where you're inviting these people to your trainings so they can see what it's like. That's going to boost your recruitment and retention. We were able to share in the neighboring departments, 4 departments around us. We were able to put an AFG grant together for fire prevention and life safety. And we were able to, again, with that, develop some fire prevention materials and also some training materials that we're going to be able to share together. We've got to make sure that we design those training programs that's going to increase awareness to human actions that can lead to fires, burns, scalding, and fire-related injuries or fatalities. And we've got to develop the knowledge to prevent fires or to minimize injuries from fire and heat, especially when a fire does occur. So I think those are very, very important. Performing assignments is one, but making sure that we're addressing the needs of our stakeholders. Firefighter Close Calls provides weekly, daily drills. Pull them up. They're free. Why not use them? I think the important thing of those drills is, like it is for all of us, everyone goes home at the end of your incident. Everyone goes home at the end of your training activities as well. We talked
Brian,
about
before you go ahead on that, let's go back 2 slides. I'm not going to repeat what I know most of what you said, because we both have cancer and health and wellness as one of our passions as well. But Brian and I have sort of used this word traumatic brain injury instead of just talking about how we are impacted by events we're at. because if you look at the damage done to the brain when we respond on significant events, it is just like traumatic brain injury when you have a concussion. Not as severe, but it is. And we need to take this more seriously. It is not something that we in the fire service, in my opinion, and I think Brian's on this as well, we don't take our mental wellness or traumatic brain injuries serious enough to make sure that we're taking care of our firefighters. All right, Brian.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna piggyback on you. 75% of firefighters. I mean, the increase in cancer in firefighters is alarming. And we've put documents out, whether it's the International Association of Fire Chief, VCOS, MVFC, or whoever it is. We put documents out assisting firefighters and protecting them from cancer. But what irks me the most, John, and you know it because you and I see the same thing, is when I pick up a social media page and I see firefighters working in operations at a fully involved structure fire with no PPE on, no SCBA on. It's just alarming. They don't understand that it may not happen to them today or tomorrow, but 20 or 25 years down the road, you're sitting underneath that intensified modulated radiation therapy machine wondering, what the heck was I thinking of back in those days? So, we've got to be vigilant. We've got to be vigilant with our occupational cancer trainings, and we've got to be vigilant with our decon calls and bagging up our gear. That's got to be a priority that we have to put inside of our training programs and inside of our policies each and every day. We talked about some sample lesson plans. There are sample lesson plans that are out there, and we also talked about the importance of sample lesson plans being used uh, across the board in our training, so that everybody's learning the exact same structure, the exact same procedure, and we're doing it right. So if I'm the officer on the rig and I turn around and I see who I have there, I know exactly what their job is going to be. I think that's crucial. But some very simple things that you're going to find in a lesson plan are, hey, the topic. What's our topic? What's our level of instruction? When we design our lesson plans, are they for the beginner? Are they for the intermediate, or are they for the veteran? Or is there a blend of all? The time required, the materials you're going to need in it, maybe some references. As John posted up here on our screen, there are some sample lesson plans up here that we can use. There's other state associations out that have them on their websites as well. But I think when we're preparing a lesson plan, I think it's important to put a motivational activity in there. You've got to motivate your learners to understand that, hey, this is good, what we're looking at. This is a motivational activity. That could be a very gift, something used with technology, with some of the motivational games that we have up there, or just the feedback, back and forth between our team. You got to have objectives. Follow those objectives. You've got to make sure they're learner focused. And the most important thing, John talked about earlier, and I talked about earlier, check for understanding. Get the feedback. I think they're crucial.
Brian, thanks. I made it back. I can hear you now. Hopefully
Okay.
you all can hear me. Uh, when you look at firefighter injuries, especially in the volunteer fire service, we have a significant amount of firefighter injuries that impact their lives. And when you look at all the things that we expect them to do, are we making sure that they're safe in doing it? Trying to make sure that this is not my other iPad still not trying to get the screen up here. Might be. So I'm sorry. Technology just is failing me today for some reason. Um, but look at how safe we're doing the job. Are we actually doing the job in the way that it was designed to be done? In the way that I'm not saying we do everything according to the book, but we do things mostly according to the book. One, because that's the way we train. We train to some book, and keep that in mind. That's our goal: is to make sure that we have overall operational scene safety. And when we break the rule, we have to hold our firefighters accountable. That's the problem. It's called normalization of deviance. When you ignore firefighters breaking the rules, that's when it becomes normal. It's what we can always do. So keep that in mind, Brian.
Yeah, Paul Coombs. I mean, if you ever, haven't had a chance to look at some of Paul Coombs' work, it's so important. Are you progressive? How do I make training more relevant? We've given you some ideas now that it's so important. What are some ways that we can do that? Take a tour around your department, do a survey, meet with your people, meet with them, bring your community to your station. And how do I teach to a younger generation? Study, look, read, you know, listen to them. I think that's so important. Education has changed. The way we coach kids have changed. There's no question about it. And we need to be able to adapt to those changes. You know, um, I think it's important also to utilize experience in some of the veterans. When you sit back sometime and you talk, I think we talk about the, rear step discussions that we have. But, sometimes these people have a lot to offer to us. And not just the way it was, but what's unique about the fire service and what made them be, what they are in the fire service today. And how can I recruit? Bring them to your station, open yourself up, share them, put some positive social media out there. Bring you've got to bring them to your station. You're not going to go to them. I think they want to come and see what's happening there, and you've got to be honest with them as well. I see we have okay, somebody did raise their hand, but they put it down, John. And somebody else wants us to go back to slide 8 and 9 when we're done.
Survival skills for people under pressure is I learned from C.W. Metcalf, who wrote a book called Lighten Up many years ago, about the power of laughter and how important that is in our job. And we have a tough job in the fire service, and we have a tough job running training and doing training. So I encourage you to look at ways that you can be happy. I have carried around these red noses for many years, handing out at presentations. Have one in my pocket because there's nothing that brings a smile to your face quicker than putting a red nose on your nose and looking at somebody else. So remember, as tough as our job is, don't forget to take care of ourselves, mentally as well as physically. We'll give you a second to write down our email addresses if you'd like them. Brian and I are glad to talk to you, share ideas with you. I looked in the chat box. There's a couple things in the chat box. I'll be sending you a couple more things in the chat box. So don't get, you can go to the chat box today, find 2 things, but by tomorrow there'll be 5 or 6. We'll get that done for you.
I think what's important, John, as we close is that we understand that all departments are not the same. There's large departments, volunteer departments, career departments. There's smaller volunteer and career departments. So I think the biggest thing is making sure that when we develop our training programs, we develop it for the type of department that we have and the needs that we're going to meet within our community.
Yeah. Well, we certainly thank you all for coming. We appreciate your attendance, and hopefully it's been some good information for you. Now, I don't know what's going on here, man.
Jan, one of the things they're requesting, if you can post the links to the training documents that we have, the training volunteers to be combat ready. They're looking for that one as well. I think we lost John.
All right, yeah. If you just Google training volunteer firefighters, you'll be able to find that document that released in November of 2022. You'll get a link for the recorded session today, maybe in 4 hours, but definitely you'll have it by the morning. We hope you will fill out the survey and keep that in mind. Brian, thank you very much for coming, helping me participate, or helping us develop this program, helping us write that document. We think it's going to help the fire service. So,
I appreciate that, John. And my relationship with you and your team at VCOS has just been remarkable. And I can't thank the National Volunteer Fire Council for what they've done in their initiatives with health, safety, and training. So thank you all for being on. If, again, you saw our emails, feel free to contact us, and we'd be glad to discuss anything with you or send you any information that we have. Stay safe. Everybody goes home.
All right. Goodbye. Goodbye to everybody.